President Trump's longtime ally, Tom Barrack, is headed back to court today. Barrack, a close advisor who once ran Trump's inaugural committee, was released on a $250,000 bond after being arrested last Tuesday. He will be arraigned on charges of failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, obstruction of justice, and lying to investigators. He's expected to plead not guilty. Joining me now to discuss, Justice correspondent Pete Williams and former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner. Glenn, $250 million bond, that is extraordinarily high. What does this say about what he's potentially done or what he's being charged with, and how much of a flight risk he's considered?
Steph, it is extraordinarily high for you and me and probably Pete, but it is a fraction of Tom Barrack's overall wealth. Of course, the judge also ordered that he be outfitted with a GPS monitor. So it's going to be very hard for him to flee, and I assume he will show up as directed in federal court today in Brooklyn to be arraigned on the charges. But what it says, Steph, is these are deadly serious charges. This is no mere, snafu in neglecting to file paperwork with the Department of Justice to announce that he was a foreign lobbyist for the United Arab Emirates. When you read the indictment and you look at the press release by the Department of Justice, they say flat out that Tom Barrack was acting at the direction of the UAE to influence U.S. foreign policy. They say that he was providing intelligence to the United Arab Emirates. And then they say his criminal conduct was, quote, disloyal to the United States. And he is now facing a statutory maximum of more than 50 years in prison for 7 felony offenses. Of course, we all recognize that he will ultimately, if he's convicted, get far less because the federal sentencing guidelines are much more lenient than the statutory max.
Well, the charges are major. Pete, what can we expect in court today?
Well, it's going to be a very straightforward, cut-and-dried hearing. He'll plead not guilty, and the judge will probably set bail conditions as well. The judge has to start all over again with the bail conditions. But you're right. Flight risk is the key to this. The government says not only does he have enormous amounts of personal wealth, he has his own airplane. He's a citizen of Lebanon. They say, if he skipped the country and went to Lebanon or the UAE or Saudi Arabia where he did business, none of those countries have an extradition treaty. We'd never see him again. So you can expect the same kind of conditions: GPS monitoring, surrender his passport, can't use any private aircraft, including his own, probably a curfew. That's what the judge in California said. So what's going to happen here is that he'll be out on these very strange, very strong conditions until his trial. It's very unlikely that he'll be held in jail until his trial, which, of course, won't be for many, many more months.
Glenn, will this case have any impact on the Trump inauguration investigation that's happening in D.C. and the Trump business, the Trump Organization investigation in New York? Trump hasn't said a word, and Barrack, that's his boy.
Interesting that Trump has not leapt to the defense of Tom Barrack the way he did to Rudy Giuliani, Alan Weisselberg, and others. And hard to read the tea leaves on that, Steph, but it's hard to imagine how this won't impact, for example, the investigation that the D.C. Attorney General, Karl Racine, is conducting, looking into the Trump inaugural committee. That was a case, an investigation that was opened in early 2019. And look, I think the other thing this says, Steph, if we pull back to 30,000 feet, is that the indictment circle is potentially tightening because you have Alan Weisselberg, longtime Trump ally and business associate. You now have Tom Barrack, 40-year close friend and ally of Donald Trump. You have Rudy Giuliani, not indicted, but whose electronic devices have been seized because a federal judge determined there was likely evidence of crime in Rudy's electronic devices. One of these individuals have to say at some point, I'm done throwing in my chips with Donald Trump. I'm going to begin to cooperate with prosecutors.
Well, you'd think.
Stephanie,
Glenn
Donald
Kirshner,
Trump.
Pete Williams, thank you both. Yes?
Yes, Donald Trump and Tom Barrack had a falling out several months ago. That's why you're not hearing from Trump. Trump was very unsatisfied with all the news about the potential for foreign contributions to the inauguration.
Interesting. Glad you made that point. Pete Williams, Glenn Kirshner, thank you both so much. Coming up, well, maybe they had a falling out a few months ago, but let's remind our audience. A week before the election, Barrack threw $100,000 lunch per head, honoring Ivanka for all that she's done.